Yo, what's going on, everybody? It's your boy Conor, me with another video, and we're gonna have presidents who represented each decade. Now, these are the presidents that, when you think of this decade, that you probably are going to think of these presidents. Now, of course, this is a kind of opinionated and disclaimer. This also does not mean they were the best president, except they were probably the most popular president. And once it comes to like history books or whatever, like 100 years from now, when they think of this decade, they'll probably think of the general people will probably think of that president who served in that decade. And starting off the list was the first decade that America has ever gotten a president, 1780s, George Washington. And the reason why, he was the only president in the 1780s when he served 1789. So they barely made this list. 1790s was George Washington again. I did not have John Adams because, for first of all, John Adams was the first term president, but it's mainly because George Washington got reelected with no competition. That's how popular he was. Now, the 1800s, the decade of the 1800s, was Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson was very, very popular, especially with the Louisiana Purchase, and he got reelected easily. So he was very popular among the American people. But I mean, let's face it, they are probably going to say this next president for the next decade, 1810s, is James Madison. Now, James Madison is probably going to be known as maybe the War of 1812, the era of good feelings, but he's probably going to be known as the guy who wrote the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And that alone makes himself very, very popular among the 1810s. 1820s, I put James Monroe, is because, well, again, he ran uncontested because of like the era of good feelings. And this person would have probably made it over James Monroe, but he only served 1 year in this decade, and that's why he is part of the 1830s, because the 1830s are represented by Andrew Jackson. Now, Andrew Jackson is one of the most noticeable presidents in history. Um, I mean, literally, he's on the $20 bill. He is a war hero. Maybe you know him as president, maybe a war hero, but most people know about Andrew Jackson and the Wild, and he was easily reelected, where he won reelection against Henry Clay in the 1832 election, the start of the Whig Party. Fun fact: 1840s. This one is actually the toughest one because, well, we've had one, two, three, four. We had five presidents in the 1840s. Now, in terms of the presidency, I'm gonna say Zachary Taylor and not James K. Polk, because a lot of people don't know James K. Polk. I think people know more about Zachary Taylor than they do James K. Polk. Now, once it comes to maybe accolades or once it comes to longest term in the presidency, it's James K. Polk. But people probably know Zachary Taylor more because it's the war general, and they knew he was a president, so they're like, oh yeah, 1840, Zachary Taylor was president, instead of, oh yeah, James K. Polk was president. And then again, 1850s were a little bit harder, but I think it's going to be the president that represents the 1850s is James Buchanan. And the reason why I put James Buchanan is he's the worst president in U.S. history, or consistently ranked top 3 worst presidents in history. And the main reason why is because he did nothing to help stop a civil war. So yeah, he's noticeable. He's noticeable because of the wrong thing. 1860s, easy. It's Abraham Lincoln. Now, Abraham Lincoln served the most amount of time by 1 month in the 1860s. And of course, he's ranked as like the greatest president of all time by me, myself included, and most historians. The Civil War, one of the America's famous war in history. He was president during then, but mainly he was he's noticeable about freeing the slaves. So, of course, Abraham Lincoln is going to be 18 represents the 1860s. 1870s, I put Ulysses S. Graham, and the main reason why is because the other president, Rutherford Hayes, that served in the 1870s was Rutherford Hayes. Not that much people know about Rutherford Hayes, but of course, a lot of people know about Ulysses S. Grant because, he was a very influential general as he helped the Unionists win in the Civil War. So definitely represents the 1870s. Now, 1880s, 1880s, I'm going to say Grover Cleveland because a lot of people know Grover Cleveland. Might be because of his name, might be because he was his body size, but yeah, definitely a lot of people know that name, Grover Cleveland. But the main reason why I put Grover Cleveland is because his name's more recognizable than James A. Garfield, Trussa A. Arthur, Benjamin Harrison. These are presidents that, if you really didn't study presidents, you would have no idea. But if you said Grover Cleveland, you'll probably be like, yeah, I heard that name from somewhere. So, yeah, probably because he's the first president in history to serve two non-consecutive terms. 1890s again went to Cleveland because not that many people know Harrison, and I don't really think people know that much about William McKinley. I don't. I think again, the 1870s to 1890s are the years of the forgotten presidents. That's what the historians name as the forgotten presidents. Probably because they weren't good and they had a lot of corruption. It's probably why they're forgotten. Or they just didn't do anything too good or recognizable. 1900s, this is pretty obvious. It's Theodore Roosevelt. He was extremely popular. If he ran in 1908, he would probably have won. 1912, if he got the Republican nomination, he would have probably won against the guy who represents the 1910s. But yeah, Theodore Roosevelt was extremely popular as he destroyed Alton Park in the 1904 election. Yeah, just so 1900s is most definitely Theodore Roosevelt. 1910s is Woodrow Wilson. Because not that many people know. I mean, it could be William Howard Taft, but the only reason people know Taft is just because of the bathtub incident, and that might not even be true. But people know more about Woodrow Wilson because of World War One. That's probably the main issue is World War One and how he has some people say he's terrible, and others say he's a really good president. So you make your opinion on that one, but definitely I do think that 1910s Woodrow Wilson represents it. 1920s, I say Calvin Coolidge. It's because Harding died, and he's ranked as probably again the top three worst presidents of all time. But people know more about Calvin Coolidge than they do Harding. The other president that served in 1920s was 1929 and Herbert Hoover. But again, easily the person that represents the 1920s is Calvin Coolidge. I mean, he destroyed John Smith or John Davis in the 1924 election. 1930s, FDR. Yeah, so the person, well, first of all, Herbert Hoover might go to 19th. Actually, no, he would not go to 1930s because the Great Depression, but 1930s is easily the FDR because like the New Deal, and yeah, and he got reelected easily. Well, yeah, he got reelected easily in 1936 against Sam Winkie. I don't know. I think it was Sam Winkie. I don't know. Either which way, he destroyed the competition, and definitely the represents the 1930s, 1940s. Again, FDR. Now, Harry S. Truman was president between 1945 and 1949, but still, he became the first president in history to serve more than two terms, and he destroyed both of them. He destroyed all the elections he was in. So, yeah, definitely represents the 1940s. Harry S. Truman, he might only be known in history for like the 1940s as the bombing of Nagasaki and Hiroshima. So yeah, I'll say definitely 1940s is FDR. 1950s is Eisenhower. There was a reason why he destroyed Adlai State Stevens in the 1956 election. He was extremely popular. In fact, he chose to run the country by himself more than to take action. He was, I think, he was very popular, especially with the North on the Brown v. Board of Education. Yeah, he wasn't very egotist. I mean, the war general in World War II, but he just wasn't too like intervenient. He rather play golf and run the country because he was like, this country's so good. It doesn't need to run by. It can be run by itself, and I'll be fine. I'll step in when I have to. 1960s is John F. Kennedy. Even though John F. Kennedy served for 2 years, he is among Americans' favorite presidents. He is very popular because maybe his good looks, maybe because he handled the Cuban Missile Crisis pretty good, the Bay of Pigs invasion. Maybe it's because he had a beautiful wife in the 1960s. Maybe it's because he got assassinated. So like presidents are definitely more known when they are assassinated or die in office. But who knows? Could be because he slept with Marilyn Monroe and the conspiracy how she got killed by the government. Who knows? But definitely very, very popular. Lyndon B. Johnson's probably just going to be known for Vietnam in the Civil War, in the Civil Acts, which was pretty cool, which was a pretty good deal. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 was really good, but Lyndon Johnson's is probably just going to be known for Vietnam. The president that represents the 1970s was Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon easily represents the 1970s, and well, he destroyed he destroyed George McGovern in 1972 election. And no, it's not because of Watergate. Okay, if Watergate never happened, then Nixon would still destroy George McGovern. No one knew who George McGovern was. The only people that knew about George McGovern were like hippies and stuff. And the entire Watergate scandal that still stands to this day. So definitely the most popular president. When you think of the 1970s, you probably think of Nixon. Ford didn't serve that long, and Carter, just not as popular as Nixon. 1980s, obviously, it's going to Reagan. Reagan was extremely popular. There's a reason why he had the greatest election performance of any candidate in history in 1984 against Walter Mondale. He won big in 1980 against incumbent President Jimmy Carter. But yeah, just a funny guy. Everyone loved Reagan. So definitely represents the 1980s. Will definitely be Reagan. 1990s, I call him Clinton because the only other president that served was H.W. Bush, and he's not going to be as known as Clinton. Clinton's known as like the Monica Lewinsky situation, just a lot of scandals that have gone his way. Maybe it's because of the good economy, but definitely more noticeable than George H.W. Bush. The president that represents the 2000s, I'll say George W. Bush because Barack Obama only served 1 year in the 2000s and Bill Clinton served 1 year in the 2000s. George W. Bush is, of course, going to be known in history, maybe for the 2000 election that he won. Maybe it's because of, 9/11. He was the president during 9/11. Maybe it's because of the 2008 recession. Maybe. Well, that's probably it. Maybe it's because, you know, the war of Iraq, so definitely the president that represents the 2010s. In the 2000s, now onto the 2010s. Now, it was really hard. In the 2010s, it's really hard. I'll probably go with Obama, but probably is going to represent the 2010s. But who knows? Donald Trump makes such a great impression that, like, oh yeah, 2000, like in history, it's going to be like, the presidents that served under 2010s, the first African American president served most of the 2010s, Obama, okay. Or maybe a very controversial president and a savage, Donald Trump. COVID. COVID, you know, protests became an all-time high in 2020. Existed in Obama's presidency, but it reached it reach its peak in 2020. Who knows? It might reach its peak later. Okay, this video was made in 2020. No, so I'm gonna say undecided. I think it's too early to tell who's gonna be the most noticeable president in 2010s. My guess is probably Obama, but who knows? Who knows? So the hardest ones were definitely 2010s and the 1840s. Yeah. So this is my list. So altogether, this list is about like in history books when you tell them these were the presidents that served in this decade, is probably going to be the most recognizable name. And a lot of these are because of the lasting legacy, but also a lot of this might have been before they were president. But yeah, anyways, guys, hope you liked this video. Tell me what you agree and disagree. Anyways, guys, love you guys. Bye.